What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the Alto again. And this time we are here with Austin Collins of Back from Zero. It is great to be able to finally make this happen. Great to talk to you, man.
Hey, likewise, man. Thank you very much for having me. This is great. I'm very much looking forward to this. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, man. Of course. This 5 EP that you just put out is absolutely kick-ass. With these 5 songs that we've heard so far, is this maybe a good representation of what the direction that Back from Zero is going to go from here on out? Is this like a good teaser for what like a full-length album is going to sound like, or are we still sort of like getting the feet wet and testing the waters to see what happens?
You know what? It's a little bit of all of what you just said, actually. It's definitely a representation of what we do rock and roll wise. However, at the same time, we've all discussed like opening up the different avenues of different types of music and whatnot. So it's always going to be like a hard and heavy rock and roll for the most part. But we definitely want to open up the different ways of different styles of music, writing different avenues and stuff like that. But we are coming out with another EP eventually, very soon. We already have it in the works, so we're recording another thing going on. And that too will be heavy and driving as well. It's a little darker, the new stuff coming up. The 5 EP is much more like a Guns N' Roses type of heavy rock, but your hard rock, but like driving rock and roll like that. It's got that like big robust behind it. The stuff that's coming up is definitely as big, but it's a little darker. So it's going to be really interesting.
Well, hearing you mention those different references, I actually call this EP sort of like in a space between dimensions, between like the 80s rock vibe to when we were going into grunge to when we were going into like the 90s alternative sound. I feel like that this album is like, you would have find this EP in almost kind of like the purgatory space between those eras, which I mean is a compliment.
Absolutely. No, and you'd be 100% right. The ranges of influence go everywhere from like Zeppelin and, the Beatles to like Guns N' Roses, Tool, the Black Crowes, like, and the whole Seattle scene was just a huge influence. So it's definitely, it's a combination. It's like a snowball of like all that stuff going on. It's everything from the early 80s, the hard rock, the 90s grunge, and all. It's like a combo of the whole thing put together, and I would say.
And seeing you at other shows, from our buddy in Lamakia to, seeing
Right.
A lot of our mutual friends, bands and stuff, is there a lot of modern day influences that are also factored into Back from Zero?
Oh, well, I mean, you can't help the local influence. I mean, bands listen to each other, and you definitely listen to what somebody else is doing. You're like, oh, I like that. I like that. So, bands definitely, when there's a scene going on, they write in a certain style sometimes. Like, everybody's got their own thing, but there's always like a sound, like a Brooklyn sound or like an LA sound or something like that. So there's always, I think, a mutual respect and influence on everybody in the scene for the most part. So I would say yes to that.
I feel like our scene in particular has gotten a lot more diverse over the years because, we have like, of course, paying tribute to the New York hardcore scene, but we have like a black metal scene and a death metal scene and like a rock scene and sort of like an indie scene. So it almost seems like if you're just going to a lot of shows and constantly stumbling into different experiences, you're going to be influenced one way or another.
100%. And I think that the great thing, not even the funny thing, but the great thing about like today in general is just we live in a generation where like not only is there so much music available, but I'm not so much is there so much different music out there, like different style, but it's available. And that's the crazy thing, because like nowadays you can be influenced by somebody who lives in 8,000 miles away. Like it's no longer just a local thing. If you're looking for a certain style of music, you can go on your computer, you look up that style, and like a whole bunch of different bands show up, and it's like, wow, you got all this stuff going on. And it's just like the world, because of everything that's like with the electronics and the phones and everything, the world is influencing itself and each other at the same time as the local scene. So I just think it's great.
Well, and what's interesting is I feel like, and I'm going to get probably a little bit of dirt for saying this, but like...
Go for it.
I feel like the internet in itself, it's obviously had its long line of disadvantages too. But like, I feel like the internet has brought its own scenes within that. Like, how many times have we associated the emo music scene with MySpace, right? And
absolutely,
like,
yeah.
And
totally.
it just seems like that there's a lot of Facebook pages for metalheads and like a lot of underground.
Yeah.
I think the Metal Archives thing has been almost like a gem and how that's exposed to like underground stuff as well.
Right.
So it almost seems like the internet is its own world with its own line of different scenes as well.
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, that's a great, and that nowadays that's a great thing because you have the ability to join like groups on Facebook, and you find new friends through that, and they live in the craziest places compared to where you are. So they're 5,000 miles away, and you're making friends in Germany, or you're making friends in England, or you're making friends in France or wherever it may be, and you got all these different groups, and they're all specialized, which is great because what you're looking for is there. So if you're into something that maybe it's not the most mainstream thing, but it's got a following, it's got a crowd. Like you were mentioning things like heavy stuff and black metal and death metal. You know what? It's as mainstream as it is because we know about it and we go to shows and we see it a lot. It obviously sells at a lot of different venues and everything, so it's a big style of music. It's still got that compartmentalization to it where it's like it's got its own audience, its own listeners, and because of all this stuff like Facebook and Instagram, you can join and find these groups so much easier than you could before, and you can join a community in a really positive way very easily. And I think it's a great thing. I think it's benefiting music in a great way.
Absolutely. The ability to connect with people all over the world. I mean, I never would have thought I'd be having conversations from Minsk, Belarus, or Chisinau, Moldova, or Gaborone, Botswana. But
right,
you see
exactly.
how far spread that all this is, which I think is just incredible.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And even if you didn't go overseas, just the fact that like you can have a conversation, like play a game even online with some guy that's or a girl that's in like California, like somebody who's just like in the country, but they're like they're states away, and like it doesn't feel that way. Everybody feels really connected, and I think it's a positive thing because everybody kind of feels as one. At least that's how I feel with everything. Like everybody feels like equal in that regard. Like everybody has touch to somebody else. You can reach out to somebody, but I think it's amazing what we're capable of doing nowadays.
Definitely. And circling back to like the album, because with this EP, was there sort of a vision you had in mind? You already mentioned your different influences, but was there sort of like a goal or a message or some sort of a meaning that was meant to be expressed with 5? You mentioned that the next EP is going to be a little bit darker. So was there a certain side of yourself that you were trying to express with this particular EP?
We just really wanted it to be as good rock and roll as it could be. That's really what I want. That when I wrote all these songs, I was just honestly thinking like if I may say so, one of my biggest influences on music in general, I would say one album that completely you say albums change your life and whatnot, and I have mine too. And it was definitely Appetite for Destruction. When that album came out, man, blew me out of the water, and I was just like, I want to write like that. I want to write an album as good as that when I'm capable of it. And so when I look at writing, I take all my favorite bands, whether it's Guns N' Roses, Tool, Black Crowes, whoever it may be, and I try to write to that caliber. Maybe I don't reach it, but I try to write to that caliber of like, I think that's great, so I'm going to try to not copy it. I never want to copy somebody, but I want to write something just as good in that same genre or vein. And when I wrote these songs, that was the attitude I had going into it, and I wanted it to be just great rock and roll. I wasn't interested, and I'm not really interested in like labels. Like I don't need to be labeled this or that. And at the end of the day, we kind of really want to be, in my opinion anyway, I want to be more like but in the vein of like a Led Zeppelin, where like you could do anything. You could write anything from like really, really heavy stuff, and then you could do an acoustic album. So like I always like that whole from soup to nuts kind of genre. Like I never want to say, nah, we can't do that. I think anything's possible if you do it in your own style.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, Stopwatch has a very different vibes from Grind, which is very different from like For You or Taking Back the Night. So like I think that every song tends to play by its own rules and have its different influences. And you mentioned Guns N' Roses. I mean, Appetite for Destruction is one thing, but you compare the GNR Lies EP to the Use Your Illusion albums, and I'll even throw this in there, Chinese Democracy. There are a couple good songs on it.
Absolutely.
Guns N' Roses was able to say is one of those bands with a very small catalog, but has been able to cover so much ground and make those different influences. But I think one thing that makes a band like with different influences that show, because look, there's a lot of times where I could guess what a band's favorite band is just by who they sound exactly alike.
Right.
But I think it's the evolution and how you evolve that ultimately is what makes all these bands different.
I agree, and it's funny because you know what I love to do? I have this funny thing where not all the time, but a lot of the time, a band, whoever they may be, a band's first album is a lot of the time my favorite because it shows, like, in my opinion, like, that's their beginning, that's their raw, like, we're working with, like, the equipment we can afford, we're working with, the only people who have any faith in this whatsoever, and when nobody's now, maybe you're not in the basement, you're playing decent shows, but, like, you're still in the getting in there stage, you're still in the beginning stages of doing it. And I love that first album feel a lot of the times on most bands. But what I've loved and I really, really love doing nowadays and I've really gotten into is, like, sticking with those bands and listening to how they evolve over the years. Like a band like Tool, when they came out, everything was just, heavy. And I love Tool. Tool's one of my favorite bands of all time. And everything was just really heavy and really, just punchy, and it was great. But then you come down now, 20 years later, whatever it may be, and they're writing melodic 12-minute songs that just entrance you. And it's great. It's like such a different transformation from, like, where they started to where they come now. And I just think that's a great example of what you're talking about with, like, bands evolving over time, just like sounds evolving and just music in general evolving over time. I think the longer you do it, the more you learn. And I think a lot of the times, maybe not always, but a lot of the times, the songs come out while different. Just the writing itself may be better as you go along because you're just learning. You can't not learn how to do something better if you're playing it for years at a time, 2 hours a night, on stage 5 times a week. Well, you just can't not get better. You know what I mean?
Well, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, I believe.
Absolutely, you're 100% right. Yeah.
So are we going to see any 15 to 12 minute long songs from Back from Zero anytime soon? Because that's one thing. You mentioned Down and Dirty Rock and Roll, which the influence is definitely on here. But, you have, bands like Pink Floyd and Yes and whatever who succeed, but...
Love them. I love those guys. Pink Floyd's another one of my favorite bands of all time. I absolutely love them, man.
Are we going to get any 12-minute long songs for Back from Zero?
You know what? I'm not gonna say it's off the table. I never go into writing anything with, it has to be this long or it has to be this. It's just like, okay, well, here's the idea. Let's let it grow. Let's see where it goes. Let's see what we do. And if it turns into a 12-minute song, all the better. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with a 12-minute song. Like David Gilmour used to say, he goes, a 6-minute song is nice, but why write a 6-minute song when you could write a 16-minute song? And I always thought that was a really funny way, but a great way to look at the music. Not because you have to aim to do more for no reason, but because you may have a lot more reasons to want to do more. And I think that's a great way to approach music.
Well, with people having, a lot of people having the attention spans of a raisin nowadays, those long songs are hard. I feel like there are only 3 bands that really got huge by making long songs, and that was Pink Floyd, Metallica, and Tool. I think those are the 3.
Right. Yeah.
You have Maiden, and, I feel like a band like Avenged Sevenfold kind of gets away with it a little bit. Machine Head has kind of tested the waters with that a little bit, but I think to keep a long song engaging is a whole other strategy within itself. You could write amazing songs, but I can't tell you how many amazing songs have been ruined just by, like, that one extra minute of just gibberish.
Right. Right. No, I know exactly what you mean. It's like there's some songs that are great, and it has that one part you're like, that's not my favorite part. Doesn't ruin the song, not at all. But no, I know exactly what you mean. I do. I get that.
Like The Memory Remains by Metallica. I love that song. After the final chorus, I don't know why they needed to add that second ash to ash, dust to dust. I'm like, oh, come on. Like, I personally think that adds, that's like an add-on that's just not necessary. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, if I may agree with that on another level, there's a song by Tool. I think it's the song. I forget the name of the song. However, there's this one part in it, and the part's not a bad part. But it just, for me, goes a little too long. Like, it would have been a greater part if it went half the amount of time and had the same boom impact when it came back in. And again, so I get that. It's like that sometimes you got to be really careful with a long song because, one, you can lose people, and 2, like you said, you can have a great song and just all of a sudden you do that one extra thing and somebody goes, that lost me right there. Yeah. So it's a tricky thing you got to do.
Yeah. Oh, Porcupine Tree's another band that I thought did it probably, and Dream Theater, of course.
Good band. Yeah.
But they are in their own, like, prog sort of where people who like those bands are seeking that type of structure.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's literally what they do. That's their thing. So they get away with it because that's how they came out of the gate. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And they're good at doing it. I mean, those bands that you just mentioned are great. I've heard them myself, and they're wonderful.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. And I have a few more, like one or two more questions for you. But also seeking back to influences, being in New York City. I mean, I don't know if you were born and raised in the city or not, but
yeah.
But okay, so were you like experiencing like the New York hardcore scene and sort of like the earlier days of that? Did that at all make an impact on how you write music as well?
I was around for the hardcore scene, and it's funny, we were still back then at my time, we were more like a hard rock band in the hardcore scene playing at L'Amour's. And the cool thing was, because the crowd, the crowd at L'Amour's was just awesome. The community there, everybody got along. Like I knew John 30 years ago when he played with Candiria for the first time, and I knew him in Dead Air, one of his first bands. And I know the hardcore scene in general. When that came around, it hit like nothing else ever did really in Brooklyn. It was a big, powerful thing. So I think it's fair to say that no matter who you were or where you were from in New York City at that time, if you were in any music scene, that influenced you on some level. You couldn't not. You had bands like Life of Agony, you had bands like Sick of It All, you had bands like Candiria, you had bands like Type O Negative. Like these guys came out and they were great at what they did, and they were young. Like we're not talking about like a bunch of older guys who've been listening to music 30 years. These guys were raw, full of energy, angst, anger, and they were playing these fucking heavy riffs, man. They were just like, killer. And they're like, 19 years old. And they're just giving the world the middle finger, and they took it around the globe, man. I think the hardcore scene was amazing.
You're always a hardcore kid, and always a hardcore kid. Like, I don't see, because, none of us are getting any younger, but like, you talk to like the old hardcore, nobody's going to call them hardcore seniors anymore. I think you're always going to be like a hardcore kid,
Right, yeah, no, totally, absolutely.
Yep. And you're right, that does influence you one way or like Type O Negative, they're not a fucking hardcore band, but like they're gothic metal and all this, but like and doom and whatever, but the obviously Peter's history with Carnivore and like through their scene, they're always going to have one foot in the hardcore scene one way or another.
Of course. Yeah.
Yep. So
absolutely.
So could Back from Zero ever be playing like one of them hardcore matinees? We got to hit up Drew Stone and maybe get a show at Bowery Electric, or maybe play a Niagara show.
I'm not adverse to anything, man. If there's a show and somebody wants Back from Zero there, or we can get in, I'm there. I don't, that's the other cool thing about New York now. Like, and sometimes it works against, but sometimes it works for. All the different shows, depending upon what you're going to see, unless it's like a specialized show where it's just a metal show, or it's just a rock show, or it's just a rap show, whatever it may be, most of the time the scene is a bunch of different acts put together on one stage for the night. So we're used to playing with heavy bands, lighter bands. We've played with the rap acts at different venues. So, man, if there's a show and a hardcore band is down to have Back from Zero there, you let me know and we'll be there.
I mean, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the last time I saw Guns N' Roses, it was at Louder Than Life Festival in Kentucky in 2019, and opening for them was Godsmack and Ice Cube. And
not right, exactly.
And the crowd went equally as insane for everybody. So
of course, yeah, that's totally, yeah.
So
totally, that's great.
So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today and for coming on the show. Just with the release of this 5 EP and new stuff coming in the works, what else could we be expecting from Back from Zero from the future?
We're definitely going to be playing some shows. We're hoping to tour. If we can get something set up, we'd like to do some touring. And also, like I said, we are starting to record a new EP, so we have that to look forward to. Probably, I'm hoping within a year we'll have it out. We're going to ride this one out for a little bit. We're going to start recording as soon as we can. We're getting stuff ready in our studio now to start recording, and we're hoping we can have it out by maybe next spring, the latest, if we can get it together.
Hell yeah, we hope to see that happen very soon. But thank you so much, everybody. Back from Zero 5 EP. Be sure to check that out. New stuff coming very soon. We'll see you next time on Heavy New York.